The art of strategic timing is as old as time itself. Hear these ancient words.
To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to get, and a time to lose. A time to keep, and a time to cast away. A time to keep silence, and a time to speak.
The ancient words of a prophet in the Old Testament and a blacksmith shop doing a brisk business in a shire town 100 years ago. In these are all of the real secrets of the strategic use of time that anyone will ever need to know. The prophet told the simple truth about time, so commonplace a treasure that most of us pass it by. The blacksmith lived by the prophecy when he used the quiet weekday hours to ready his iron and make his nails for the rush of horses to be shod and plows to be mended when Saturday morning came. Then the fires would be hot, the bellows pumping, and the iron glowing from red to white, ready to be shaped, just at the right time when heat and hoof were ready.
To everything there is a season. Iron's in the fire. Strike while the iron is hot.
In these three homely truths lie the secret of managing life's most precious commodity, time. The successful manager may be just like the rest of us in most things, but his timing, there's his secret.
One thing I've learned since I became general manager of my company, deciding when to implement a decision is just as important as the decision itself. There's no such thing as a right decision alone. It can only be right at the right time.
Timing. We speak of it in awe as though it were some kind of great magic. Yet this manager knows that it is not a natural gift, but an acquired skill that can be learned and perfected. He and other successful managers, selected from a variety of industries, were asked to give their opinions as to what conscious efforts could be made to develop a sense of timing. They all agreed that a sense of timing demanded that 5 separate actions be taken in this order. First, gauge the situation. Look to the weeks ahead and find out what pattern of events is likely to occur. The blacksmith knew that Saturday, when most farmers came to town, would be his busiest day. He knew that more axe handles and blades would be damaged in the fall. Plowshares were spring casualties. Second, plan ahead. Decide how you will approach each problem or opportunity. The blacksmith invested in a good supply of iron for plowshares to be ready for use in spring. Hickory and ash were fashioned into axe handles during the slow winter months. Extra help and extra horseshoes were ready during spring and summer. Third, wait for the opportune moment. Hold back your effort until the right time. Don't put your iron in the fire until the time draws near to use it. The metal may be ruined, time and money wasted. Fourth, climax the effort. Throw the weight of your effort into the job at the selected moment. Strike while the iron is hot. The blacksmith knew that the moment to shape the iron had arrived when it glowed a certain shade of red or pink. If you know your business, you too will recognize the strategic moment to strike. Fifth, follow through. Make sure that your impetus is not lost or turned aside before success is sure. For the blacksmith, shaping the horseshoe or axe handle was not the whole story. The shoe still had to be fitted properly to the horse's hoof, and the axe handle had to be firmly helved. Or the town would find another smithy. In addition to those 5 steps, in order, these managers all emphasized 2 other factors in strategic timing. First was economic timing.
I always ask myself, is my company really financially ready for this move? For instance, is this the time for us to produce our own raw materials, or should we wait and make sure that our needs will provide a steady market for the proposed raw materials subsidiary?
Your own company's balance sheets, newspaper financial pages, business and trade periodicals, and similar sources should give you the economic information you need to arrive at the right answers. Then, second, there's psychological timing.
Sometimes everything hinges on the psychology of the move. For 2 years, our company tried to buy out a supplier, but he kept thinking in terms of too high a price.
Well, I'd have just let him think about it for a while.
That's what we finally did, and it worked. We waited until his desire to sell became more urgent, and then we made a new offer, and he accepted it enthusiastically.
Strategic timing. A matter of 5 steps, applied in this exact order.
Gauge what's likely to happen. Plan your approach. Wait for the opportune moment. Climax. Take the opportune moment and follow through. And don't forget to keep a watchful eye on the timing of practical economics and psychology.
And that is the art of strategic timing.
Mr. Dexter, I really do apologize to you, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh,
I can
daring Dan,
understand
the
that.
meeting
Yes,
man.
Mr. Dexter.
Doesn't Fowler have
Yes,
anything
sir.
to
Well,
do
I'll
with call
certainly do
meetings?
my best to get you two
This is the
together.
third one he's called off
Yes,
this week.
Mr. Dexter. Yes, sir. I understand perfectly. I'll do my best. sir.
Another
Try.
crisis Monday in the office of Dan Fowler, one-time rising executive of Wilsonware Corporation. Dan is late as usual.
No, Mr. Wilson, he hasn't phoned in. He must have... Yes, Mr. Wilson, yes. I'll certainly tell him, yes, sir. In your office as soon as he gets here, yes, sir.
I just don't understand Dan Fowler lately. Why can't he stay on top of his job? Well,
Gentlemen, I'd suggest that you go back to your offices. I don't think there'll be a meeting after all. I'm sorry. Oh, Mr. Fowler, there you are. Mr. Wilson wants you in his office right away. He's called 3 times.
I know, but all these people are here for our meeting.
I've told them to go.
Wait, you dismissed my meeting?
Well, Mr. Wilson told me to.
Oh,
I've
I
got-
see. Well, in that case.
Oh, and Mr. Dexter of Warehouse Products is on the line. He's been waiting
I
to
know
try to
he
get
wants that estimate right away.
2 months ago. He said you promised him 2 months ago.
Well, these reports on my desk have been overdue for 10 days. I've got to get to them.
But what shall I tell Mr. Dexter?
Tell him anything. Tell him I've been called out of town. Just get him off my back.
Yes, sir, I'll tell him. I hate to bring this up again, especially right now, but we're all out of requisition forms, and everyone's yelling at me. And,
Well,
and
why don't you
nothing's-
order some more?
Well, you told me, Mr. Fowler, you wanted to work up some new ones personally yourself, and I kept reminding you, and now you're yelling at me, too.
Oh, look, Miss Charles, I'm sorry.
All right.
I really am.
All right.
Look, just order some more of the old forms.
All right.
And then cancel everything I have today. After I get back from Mr. Wilson's office, I'm going to take the rest of the day off and try to figure out what's happening to me.
No wonder Dan Fowler is worried. When he first came to work for Wilsonware Incorporated, he could see his objectives clearly, and the decisions that faced him on his job each day represented bright challenge rather than a dismal, oppressive burden. Dan Fowler needs help. Lucky for him that Mr. Wilson is a wise and perceptive executive.
You sent for me, Mr. Wilson?
Yes, Dan. I've been trying to reach you ever since I got here this morning. Ran into
Well-
John Dexter at the club last night, and he tells me that the only thing that's keeping him from ordering that bulk handling equipment is that he hasn't gotten the figures you promised him some time back.
Well, that is to say, I'll have them ready.
I'm afraid that's too late, Dan. He just phoned to say that he tried to reach you this morning and couldn't.
Well-
He's giving his business to our competitor.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. And what's more, we lost a big order to Leonard Lumber because you didn't check your figures carefully enough.
Well, I guess you called me in to fire me, Mr. Wilson. Can't say as I blame you.
Most people would feel justified in letting you go. But it happens that I believe you can be just as valuable to this company in the future as you were at one time.
Mr. Wilson.
But you're going to have to get on top of your job and stay there.
Thank you, sir. I'll certainly try.
I know you'll try, Dan. But you're going to have to try it the way I recommend.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I want you to clear the decks this afternoon. Just do what must be done and get out off by yourself.
As a matter of fact, Mr. Wilson, I'd already planned to. Miss Charles is canceling my appointments right now. Before I do anything else, I just want to stand to one side, sort of, try to analyze what I'm doing wrong.
Excellent. Just what I was going to recommend. Now, as a second step, I'm relieving you, as of now, of all of the extra tasks that you volunteered for.
Oh, Mr. Wilson, if you don't mind, I'd just
Dan. I've been increasingly concerned at the load you've taken on. Mostly things that we didn't have in mind when we hired you.
Well...
Those things can wait a while. Give your main job top priority. Concentrate on quality instead of quantity.
Right.
Oh, and Dan...
Yes, sir?
Let me know what you find out about yourself this afternoon.
Dan took the afternoon off as promised and analyzed his job performance in the light of shifting priorities and objectives.
Well, I became aware of the time I wasted in meetings, studying meeting reports. I realized that in most cases I could have developed everything myself or delegated it to a member of my staff.
Then, Dan went through all of his pending activities that had been tabled for lack of time.
It didn't take me long to see the necessity of attacking the important problems in order of priority. And then I reduced the less important routine tasks to standard procedures and handed them over to subordinates.
Next, he made sensible subdivisions of his working day.
I made sure that nothing interfered with my having the time necessary to plan and make tough, mind-bending decisions. I applied the first 3 or 4 hours of each day to essential, demanding tasks and saved the less demanding, light routine for the hours when fatigue began to set in.
Well, it worked. And it wasn't long before Dan was back on top of his job. As Mr. Wilson likes to say,
if Dan was good for us once, I figured that he was still good for us. All he needed to do was stand off for a while and figure out how to make the best use of his time to stay on top of his job.
Here's the morning mail, Mr. Randall. Mr. Howard on the line, Mr. Randall. Mr. Franklin to see you, Mr. Randall. I was to remind you to get on that report today, Mr. Randall. I'm ready to take dictation, Mr. Randall.
when he arrives at his office every morning, John Randall walks into a box that resounds with the sounds of clocks, the tensions of impending deadlines, and details. He never seems to get out of that box until he reaches the point of exhaustion at the end of each day. Worst of all, he's frustrated to desperation because he can't find the time or energy to do the really important things. John Randall is the international division manager of a large drug firm who finds himself floundering in administrative detail, barely able to maintain the status quo of his division. The pressure builds on John, a capable, creative executive. It builds up for weeks, months, for over a year. Then, finally, John Randall smashes his way out of the time box. John Randall was a problem solver, and his own problem was not an exception. What keyed him to escape pressures of routine administration was an article that he read.
Executives can literally stretch their time if they set goals by the month instead of by the clock. Goals by the month. Yes, that's it. Such a simple idea, and such a great one. I've got to have 2 or 3 days every week totally free from detail to get my job done. I'm going to bend my routine a little.
So John ruthlessly reestablished his priorities, relegating routine busy work to routine treatment. He set up guidelines for his staff to use on day-to-day minor decisions, which he had been making himself. This also permitted him to cut down on daily staff meetings, so that they were necessary only on a once-a-week basis. And he set aside all but the most urgent matters in his in-basket to be handled in bulk every Wednesday morning.
Hello? Oh, yes, Ann. Well, would you tell Mr. Adams that I'll call him back in an hour or so, and to leave his number?
There were still outside interruptions, but most of these could be controlled by letting phone calls accumulate until he could set aside an hour or so to respond to them, and by keeping open office hours only at certain set periods during the week. In less than a week, John had cleared the decks so that he could give thought, time, and energy to important long-range assignments.
I decided to devote my first month of emancipation from a clock-bound existence to a favorite project of mine. And my objective was to research the possibilities of increasing my company's foreign markets. Well, that first week, I was able to spend 2 days meeting with international marketing men from other companies. Now, these talks made it pretty clear that our company should be granting patent licenses to foreign firms. I let the ideas settle down in the back of my mind while I enjoyed a pleasant and relaxing weekend with my family. And then, Monday morning, when I reviewed the situation, my mind was about made up. But I cabled our branch managers overseas to get their opinions of the new approach. Their replies were unanimously favorable. And by Thursday, I was meeting with my home office staff, pulling things together to present our proposal to our company's top management group. A month's project, completed in 2 weeks. And that was a valuable lesson in itself.
John learned that it doesn't pay to be overly ambitious in setting your goals. Ample time allows you to wring the last drop of quality out of your effort. The bonus of an extra week or two can be well applied to another project which requires a more extended effort. Naturally, John, as a member of top management, has a great advantage in the flexibility he can employ in handling his time. Middle management people, beset with rigid demands from above and below, may have harder going making the monthly goal concept work. On the other hand, it's the only system that will work for those all-important undertakings whose success will mark the middle management man or woman for challenging advancement. Consider the case of Ruth Haverhill, who had just been named branch manager of a bank. She was all too familiar with the high priority she must place on seeing customers at their convenience.
A bank must take care of customers as they come in, much as a retail business does. And the bank manager is almost constantly occupied with arranging loans, straightening out accounts, and similar matters. And yet, at our office, I was confronted by some very serious problems that affected our service. I seemed to have no stretch of time that I could set aside to work on those problems.
So, Ruth made a list of important long-range projects.
Rearrange tellers' lunch hours to leave more windows open during peak periods. Study customer parking problems to see if it would pay for the bank to arrange free facilities. Ask the main office about the possibility of opening a drive-in window.
Then, during every spare moment, Ruth Haverhill concentrated on the parking problem, putting all the other problems completely out of her mind. Result?
I was fortunate to make a deal with the parking lot in the next block to give 30-minute parking for our customers, which would be paid at a modest monthly rate.
Next week, Ruth was able to get together for 2 afternoon sessions with the head teller. Result?
We developed 4 possible schedules for our tellers, which we tried over a period of 4 weeks. Then we simply selected the one that seemed to work the best.
But what about the drive-in window?
Well, as it turned out, that was the easiest assignment of all. I put a table near the front door of the bank. Now, on it was a petition form and a supply of pencils. A sign invited customers to sign their names if they wanted drive-in service.
Result?
It seems that once our customers were given the half-hour free parking privilege at the parking lot up the street, the drive-in window wasn't very important to them. You see, during that half hour, they could not only take care of their banking, but they could do some other shopping, too.
As John Randall and Ruth Haverhill know, the way to stretch your time is to put daily routine where it belongs, in short-range perspective. The big jobs need longer-range effort and cannot be accomplished without it. At the end of each month, ask yourself what you accomplished, not how much time you put in, because attempts and lost motion don't count, only results. In other words, don't try to score yourself on how much you did, but on how well you did the things that really count. John Randall adds another thought about staying out of the time bind.
Doctors who are concerned with your health tell you to stop worrying about time altogether. Management specialists who are concerned with your efficiency believe that you would make better use of your time if you didn't worry about it so often.
Does the action hotline in your company short-circuit whenever top management pushes the button? If so, Your people are missing important deadlines. Most deadline failures involving willing and capable executives can be traced to one of two types of negative factors, factors which are often beyond their control. First, there are organizational breakdowns. Foremost among these is the unrealistic allocation of workloads. Here's how it happened to Frank Fenwick.
Develop a more efficient way of moving raw materials to the manufacturing line? That's a job for Fenwick and operations.
We need a new cost control system in our manufacturing procedures, and I believe Frank Fenwick in operations could figure it out.
This is Mr. Howard's secretary, Mr. Fenwick. Mr. Howard says I'm to help you get up his report on our overall operational prospects for next year. It's due on Friday.
Fenwick is a competent man, but he couldn't be both a staff planner and an efficient operations man at the same time. In the same company, Bob Klein over in engineering had his deadline zapped by another organizational problem: poor office management.
Well, you see, Mr. Klein, you can find anything you need to know in these 15 file drawers. The first 8 are marked miscellaneous, and the next 7 are marked general.
Where is the file? Yes, Mr. Howard. The report on the logic board? You haven't received it yet? I just don't understand. I put it in my outbasket the day before yesterday.
Another short circuit, and another very dead deadline. Then, down in traffic management, the form a committee syndrome blew the fuse on Sam Taylor's deadline.
No. I don't want the report on the standing committee on the movement of assembly line traffic. See, I want the report of the ad hoc committee on parking lot traffic. Or would it be Mr. Howard's committee on executive parking? Or maybe the special study committee on the feasibility of employees...
Lines are down again, blocking a dozen deadlines while unnecessary committees convene and report. Second, and just as deadly as organizational breakdowns, there are communications bottlenecks. In this area, inability on the part of management to distinguish an alibi from a legitimate request for help with an overload can be the most damaging of all.
Yes, what is it, Fenwick?
Well, Mr. Howard, I just can't get my job done.
Nonsense, Fenwick. You're the most efficient operations man this company's ever had.
Oh, not much longer. Every time I get things running smoothly, I have another survey to make or a report to prepare, and things in operations fall apart. Now, this operational prospect study, to do this and my regular job, too, I need help, and I simply...
Well, I thought you were an efficient operations man. We don't have room for petty complaints and alibis in this company. Either you can do the job, or I'll get someone else who can.
There's a real accomplishment for you. Operations with a deadline every minute is bogged down. An important report is bottlenecked, and the entire output of manufacturing short-circuited, while a search goes on for a new operations manager as capable as Fenwick. Now, here's Bob Klein again, and this time he's about to be grounded out by muddy communications.
Before Mr. Howard left for the coast, he asked me to tell you he needs that information on the logic board thingamagummy that you're working on. You can airmail it to him.
Is that the old logic board or the new one? I'm working on both.
Oh, Mr. Howard didn't say. He just said send it airmail special.
Well, I guess I could send reports on both. What's the address?
Well, he forgot to tell me, but he usually stays at the Marlboro, but sometimes at Century Towers. Once he stayed at another...
Then, finally, on another deadline project, Sam Taylor's battery just ran down for lack of a clear company policy input.
Now, I wonder what's most important to this company. High cash flow and low profitability, or high profitability on a limited activity. Boy, this is a tough one. Well, maybe I'll slip it into the old desk drawer for a while and tackle something easier. I'll get back to it when Mr. Howard's in a better frame of mind. Maybe he won't mind explaining it.
Those lost deadlines meant lost profits to the company and lost opportunities to the individuals involved. They could have been avoided if careful attention had been paid to danger points along the way at every level: policymaking, top executive, and middle management. Beware of these organizational breakdowns.
Unrealistic allocation of workloads, poor office management, the former committee syndrome.
And watch out for these communications bottlenecks. Inability of managers to distinguish between an alibi and a legitimate cry for help. muddy communications, no clear policy on corporate objectives. Forward progress of any undertaking demands sound, clear establishment of time and accomplishment objectives. Or, to state it simply, setting up deadlines. To hold to a deadline, the deadline itself must be realistic and continually reviewed for feasibility. And all deadline short circuits which stand in the way of the objective must be diligently cleared. For all practical purposes, each of your minutes is identical, at least in terms of quantity of time spent. But in terms of quality, or how you spend that time, each minute can be vastly different from the next. You can determine the quality of your time and make the most of it by analyzing your time. Let's see how Harvey Reynolds, Vice President for Sales of Massey Machinery Company, analyzes his time. It's Monday morning, and he's phoning his president.
Very fine, and you? Great. Say, Frank, listen to the news. Consolidated has just requested our bid on the new installation. Yeah. Well, thanks, Frank. After a year, finally they're ready to move with it. Yes, I've briefed Chet Bragg in manufacturing and Ed Fleming in legal. Well, we'd like to get with you on it just as soon.
2.5 working hours of Monday morning have gone by. Quantitatively, Harvey Reynolds has studied Consolidated's request, conferred with the manufacturing vice president and the chief legal officer, and held a brief phone conversation with the president. Qualitatively, Harvey is setting his company up for the last move in winning a large and profitable order. This is a kind of productive time which Harvey can spot immediately.
I call it payoff time. I had direct, immediate, and tangible results in view from the moment I read Consolidated's request. I knew we could nail down that order by the following week, and we did. Right on schedule.
But that's not the only thing Harvey did that morning. No sooner had he finished talking with the president than Tom Pruitt, Eastern Division manager, came by with a problem.
Fine. Yes, we can all be there at 2. Thanks, Frank. See you then.
Well, congratulations, Harv.
Thanks, Tom. Now, what's this problem with Murdoch at Upland Steel?
Well, we just can't seem to hit him with the right things to spark his interest. Now, you've known him for a long time, perhaps...
Good old Chris Murdoch.
Yeah.
Chris takes some knowing, you know. Have you got a half hour right now?
Well, if you have the time, Harv, you seem to be pretty busy
Look,
right
Tom,
now.
You're going to get that order from Chris. I spent about 3 years learning how to do it, and I can pass on what I know to you in half an hour.
Great.
It's time well spent, time that'll pay off in the next few weeks. Now, here's what you do.
Well, actually, Harvey spent the rest of the morning with Tom mapping out a strategy on Murdoch. But far from being wasted, it was another kind of productive time.
I call that investment time. That is time spent to create eventual actions down the line, actions which seem to stand a chance of paying off at some future date. You know, I found that my own time is like money. I can spend it for immediate results, or I can invest it wisely for future growth and dividends. Planning of sales campaigns, the constant study of new techniques and design, training of company personnel. You know, I've seen unprepared managers who were like puppies chasing a freight train. Everything was great until they caught it. I invest time to make sure that I'll be waiting and able to capture the opportune moment when it speeds by.
Then, once a month, the president of Acme Equipment Company, Frank Hayes, conducts a meeting of all his division heads. The meeting lasts anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours, depending on the size of the agenda. This represents another kind of productive time.
I call this organizational time. It differs from payoff and investment time in that its purpose is not to take advantage of or prepare for any one specific opportunity. Instead, it's intended to solve operational problems and further the overall policy goals of the company. Such things as discussing policy with Frank Hayes, filling in as staff specialist on my new administrative procedures, and conferences with other executives all fall under organizational time. After all, we have to stay in touch, and those meetings, conferences, and reports keep us heading in the right direction, on the right track.
Finally, There's time which is not productive of anything at all.
That's wasted time. The greatest time-wasting problem I ever had was leaping before I looked. Now I make myself spend enough investment time so that I know where I'm going in advance. Sometimes procrastination was another liability of mine. My tendency was to put off boring routine chores. Well, it didn't take me long in this job to learn that the sooner I plunged into those routine administrative problems, the sooner they'd be behind me.
You can check your time expenditures first by analyzing your time for these 4 basic qualities. Payoff time. Time spent to gain immediate, profitable results. Investment time. Time spent preparing for future opportunities. Organizational time. Time spent to improve communications, solve intra-company problems, and further company policies. Wasted time. Usually time spent in none of those other 3 ways. Second, keep in mind that there's more to it than simply knowing the 4 kinds of time. The successful executive must learn how to balance them so that he doesn't waste time by concentrating on one activity at the expense of the others. He keeps his investment activities going at a sensible and steady pace. In this way, he buys the time and latitude he needs for payoff activities. While avoiding unnecessary meetings and reports, he still spends enough organizational time to maintain open communications and fulfill his obligations to others in the company.
Testing. 1, 2. May I have your attention, please? Testing.
If that sounds familiar, it's because you've been there before. You are about to enter a meeting, the place where the potential for time wasting is virtually unlimited.
Testing. May I have your attention? May I have your attention, please? Attention. I've called you all together because we feel that the best way to explain our company pension and welfare plan is to get you all in here and tell you about it. Now, first of all, Jack Wilfred of Personnel's here to give you the general rundown. Jack? Jack? Well, I guess Jack isn't here. We'll just go on without him until he does get in here. First of all, let me say that most of this information does not apply to those few of you who joined our company after your 50th birthday. And then those of you who are members of the union have your own P&W plan, so, well, I guess you might as well get back to work. There's really no need for you to be here at all.
I have a question. I joined the old P&W 20 years ago. Then I left the company for a couple of years. When I came back, they told me my old P&W was still in effect. Now, I'm over 50, and I don't know whether
If that sounds familiar, then somewhere along the line, you've been a victim of an incompetent meeting. Most executives spend 40 to 65% of their time in meetings. And with scenes like this one, it's small wonder that they attend or conduct them grudgingly. But meetings, when properly planned and skillfully executed, can get results. According to results of 6 years of research on meetings and their effectiveness by Conference Counselors of New York, Incorporated,
most meetings are called without any consideration of the most important factor to ensure their success:
Planning.
an outstanding example of the unplanned meeting was the one we just attended. Jack Wilfred of Personnel did finally arrive just in time to enter into the chaos of fielding a dozen highly specialized questions from individuals whose problems were far from representative. Finally, time had run out, and there was no time left to do what the meeting was supposed to do: give a general briefing on the company's pension and welfare plan.
Is a meeting the best way to do the job? Could it be done by phone or memo, or handled informally?
If you decide that a meeting is the only way to get the job done, then next consider
timeliness.
Is now the best time to hold the meeting? You have all the information you need to make the meeting meaningful. Is there enough available time in everyone's schedules to meet and cover the subject without unduly upsetting routine?
In your personal life, can you conceive of setting out in your car on an errand without knowing what you're going to buy or where you hope to buy it?
Purpose.
What's the purpose of the meeting? What do you want to accomplish? What objectives might other concerned people have? How does the purpose of the meeting jibe with long-range objectives?
Think of the considerations you take into account before you invite guests to your home for dinner, like social, cultural, and intellectual compatibility, balance between men and women, obligations to entertain. Why then would you show less care in conducting business meetings?
Attendance.
Who are the absolute musts? Who are the people who can contribute essential information? How many people who will be affected by your decisions should attend? Are there others who might find attendance profitable?
Only rarely is the purpose of a meeting to provide surprises. Usually the purpose is accomplishment. Again, in the role of social host, when you invite friends to be your guests on a fishing trip, you try to let them know what to expect, what clothes to wear, what tackle to bring, when they can expect to leave and return.
Advance notice.
Will it be helpful to explain meeting objectives beforehand? Or would a written agenda be helpful? Or is the purpose of the meeting to develop objectives? And would any purpose be served by saying so? And how long do you expect the meeting to last?
You wouldn't try to run a bull roast or a barbecue in the living room centered on your Arbisson carpet. If there is to be dancing at your party, you make arrangements for music in advance, and the party decor fits the occasion.
Facilities.
Is there enough space and enough of the right kind of furniture? How about a blackboard? Ventilation, acoustics, projectors, and other audiovisual aids. Will you record the meeting? Will you need stationery, special equipment, printed handouts?
Think of the most successful social events you've attended. They were invariably well organized. Why should a business meeting on which your future may depend be any less so?
Planning is where all successful meetings begin. Planning with care. Planning with sensitivity. Planning with direction. Planning with purpose. With pre-planning, your meetings can get results.
What's the trouble, officer?
Landslide up ahead. You'll have to go back and take the road around the other side of the mountain.
That'll take another hour. And I've got to be at Greater Brunswick Industrial Park by 3.
Sorry, buddy, but there ain't no other way.
Ah, well.
Another roadblock. As management people, you should be used to them by now because you face them every day. If they're small, you push through them, around them, or simply find another way. It's the big problems that make it tough to get things done on time. Take the roadblock that Ralph Dixon is facing right now. His company, a proprietary drug firm, was built from scratch by one man who, until his death a few weeks ago, had been the company's only president and board chairman. Ralph had been hired as vice president of marketing by the old man, and his thinking on the firm's growth had coincided closely with the late president's. The new president is Henry Talton, a capable but very cautious administrator who has always been a little wary of Ralph. Now, Ralph had an urgent proposal for a merger he had been developing for the late president. If it was going to come off, he had to get it moving, and fast, as another company was interested in the same acquisition.
Now, it's a typical Peterson chemical acquisition, Henry. You're probably already familiar with it since I'd gone over the plan with Mr. Peterson, and he was enthusiastic about most points.
Well, if you're talking about that Dale's compound acquisition, I do have a sketchy knowledge of it. Can't say it excites me too much, though, although it might have some merit. I really thought of it as another one of Mr. Peterson's playthings.
Well,
I'm not about to rush into some wild scheme just on the strength of your conversation this morning.
yeah, but Henry, if we can move fast enough, it'll give us a tremendous product to replace Peterson's bomb, which is the poorest moving, most outdated...
Replace Peterson's bomb?
Yes, it's outdated.
You know this company has always had a hard and fast policy about replacing any line. No, Ralph, I have to have more to go on than this supposition of yours. This just isn't the time to rock the boat. A bad time from the company's standpoint, a bad time from mine. Sorry, Ralph, but you better forget it.
So it was back to the drawing board for Ralph. Needless to say, he was inclined to blame his failure on the way he had handled things.
You remember what Walt Kelly's pogo said? We have met the enemy, and he is us. I retraced my steps just to be sure that I'd used the right approach. I considered taking the matter up with others who might be sympathetic, but that would simply broadcast my concern and might antagonize Henry Talton, our new president. Henry Talton, our new president. Without Henry, I could do nothing, and time was running out. But my greatest fault was that I was still trying to do things Mr. Peterson's way, instead of Henry Talton's way. Besides that, I was attacking the whole problem at once, instead of one step at a time.
So Ralph, heartened by this fresh point of view, approached his roadblock again, but differently. He arranged to see Henry Talton again, but this time he carried a written proposal with all necessary supporting data.
Well, Henry, I want to thank you for giving me a different viewpoint on the Dales acquisition, and to apologize for throwing things at you all at once in a bushel basket, so to speak.
Quite all right.
Henry, it's occurred to me that even though you might not plan, to pursue this matter further, there is a probability that the matter may come up at a board meeting.
Oh?
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of public speculation about this, as you know. So I have organized the entire file for your study in case you need it.
Well, thank you, Ralph. That's very thoughtful.
Well, I guess that I was burning with an enthusiasm. I wasn't restrained by the considerations that your overview make necessary.
Well, of course, marketing has always been this firm's long, strong suit, and
Yes,
I would
sir.
like to fill myself in on the whole thing.
Right.
Just in case, you understand.
Certainly, Henry, I certainly don't envy your having to deal with a new board right now.
I understand.
Now, if I can be helpful in any way, sir, please let me know.
Thank you, Ralph.
Right.
It could be sooner than you think.
Well, my hunch had been right. In analyzing the situation, I'd put myself in Henry Talton's shoes. Oh, he was really on the spot. Any carryover effort from the Peterson regime that succeeded would be credited to Mr. Peterson, in all probability. What must have concerned him most was that he would be held strictly responsible for any decision, no matter who had originated the undertaking. And on top of that, Henry probably didn't know as much about Dale's compound as he wanted to know. In short, I had handed him a hot potato, and he needed time to consider what to do with it. But he wasted no time after he'd made up his mind.
Ralph, I'm completely sold on the Dale's compound proposal.
Oh, fine.
Yes, sir. I've read your material carefully, and I have no doubt that it'll improve our profit picture, and our financial people agree with it.
Oh, that's great.
Now, it's just one thing.
What, you mean doing away with Peterson's bomb?
No, that's the least of my worries, and it's high time we change that rule anyway.
Great.
What I meant is, we'd better get this ball rolling. Time's running out, Ralph. Time is running out.
In analyzing Ralph Dixon's success in overcoming his giant roadblock, we find that the things that usually obstruct our efforts generally fall into 4 categories.
Other people, external circumstances, practices and procedures, ourselves.
Plans must always be developed from the point of view of the person who must approve them. And where an extra push is needed at the point where the buck stops, it's very important that you have strong and enthusiastic allies. External circumstances all too often spell trouble to the best-laid plans. Things like tight money, new competitive products, and Ralph Dixon's problem of changes in top administration.
When Mr. Peterson was alive, I thought my toughest job would be to get him to discontinue his original product. But a new administration worked in my favor there.
There was one roadblock that Ralph never faced: total discouragement. By maintaining a positive view, he kept his head, analyzed his problems, and bypassed his time roadblock.
Morning, Mr. Cathcart.
Morning, John Henry.
Nice day, Mr. Cathcart.
When I was a boy in a little country town in Tennessee, our foremost citizen and banker for the entire county was a man named John Henry Cathcart. About everybody in the county depended on Mr. Cathcart for something, even Congressman Mayhew. Cathcart was a powerful man of fine character who used his strength to good and useful purpose. My boyhood dreams were to grow up to be just like Mr. John Henry.
Most successful men can date the beginnings of their rise to achievement from the time when they really made up their minds about what they wanted to do with their lives. Then, by concentration of direction toward their goals, they made the time they needed to achieve them.
When the disposal of time is surrendered to the chance of incidents, chaos will reign.
Victor Hugo said it. And the wisdom of the statement is proven daily by the disorganized executive who lets circumstances tear his time and schedule to tatters. He allows himself to become the hand servant to a continuing parade of unscheduled visitors, telephone calls, and come what may interruptions.
One of the things that I've always remembered about Mr. John Henry was how he moved on his course toward any objective without waste of time or motion. He was never too early or too late for an appointment, and with his customary graciousness, he was always able to terminate any meeting, discussion, or conversation that was wasting precious time.
Mr. Cathcart probably didn't have a telephone to contend with, but it would have posed no problem for him. Men like him always know what they are going to do with each day, or week, or month, or year, and generally have alternative plans and schedules just as productive to ensure against lost motion.
Golly, I've been busy today. Started out to plow the South 40 about daybreak. Had to oil the tractor first. Found out I needed more oil, so I went by the shop to get it. On the way, I noticed the pigs hadn't been fed, so I went over to the corn crib. I saw some sacks lying there, and they reminded me that the potatoes were sprouting. And on the way to the potato pit, I had to pass the wood pile, which reminded me that my wife...
Ever notice how some people are always doing something but never seem to accomplish anything? There are a lot of executives who lose days on end out of their lives and their careers just by drifting in and out of things. They get to work, hang up hat and coat, chat with an associate about last night's TV, get coffee, look at the mail, fiddle with a few of the more interesting items, drop everything else to work on what they like, regardless of its importance, while putting off important tasks until some vague tomorrow.
I pick out people whom I can trust to do things right, and to whom I can delegate authority.
A simple and effective rule of Benjamin Fairless, former board chairman of U.S. Steel. But delegating well means more than entrusting activities to assistants. It also means that each subordinate must be developed carefully to be able to see what needs to be done and to communicate constantly, not just to be understood, but to avoid being misunderstood. The assistant who is effective understands what is expected of him.
Harry Bedlam here. Oh? You mean you don't have it? I tell you what, Mr. Evans, we're working on that one. We want to get this just right for you this time. Yes, indeed. Next week, sure. Well, that takes care of him for a few more days. I'll figure out something meanwhile. Oh, Miss Henshaw, if Gilbert Townsend phones, tell him I'm in a meeting or something. I just can't face him today. Harry Bedlam here. Oh, it's you, Mr. Featherstone. Yes, I've got my people pulling things together right now. Yes, sir, we'll have it on your desk by Monday. Close of business. Oh, that's not soon enough. Yeah, but we've only been working on it a couple of weeks. Yes, that's what I said, a couple of months. Tomorrow morning? I can't possibly... Yes, sir, tomorrow morning. Somehow.
There's always a day of reckoning. And like Harry Bedlam, if you try to handle too many problems at one time, chances are you won't solve any of them very well. To make the most of your time, you must discipline yourself to concentrate on one thing at a time.
I remember Mr. John Henry used to say, "When this minute is gone, it will be gone forever. It's yours only as long as it's there, and it can never be made up or replaced."
And that's the way every successful executive looks at time. When a visitor fails to show up, he's prepared to do something else with his time. He does his planning when he commutes or travels. He never lets a business conversation drift away from the subject at hand. Consciously or unconsciously, he follows these rules.
Decide what you want from your time. Plan how you will use your time. Expend your time where it counts the most. Concentrate on one job at a time. Respect your time as your most precious commodity.
The successful executive knows that each passing moment of his time is a blank check drawn on the future. A check which expires instantly unless cashed or invested. He makes the most of his time by filling it in wisely, and he makes it valid.